My name is Eric Jenkins. I am the tree breeding coordinator here at Meadowview Research Farms, and I've been here for 8 years. My busiest season is, of course, around late June when the flowers are ready, when it's time to pollinate. We put bags on the trees to protect them from other pollen because we want a specific pollen from a specific tree to go on that flower. So that protects them, and then the flowers develop inside the bag. When they're receptive, take the bag off, quickly apply the pollen that we want to cross the tree with, whatever it may be, whatever tree it may be. And then you put the bag back on and you wait. And it sounds pretty simple, but you're doing like 1,000 or thousands of flowers. It's pretty intense. Well, the bagging, varies because you're monitoring the trees at all time for when the trees are going to be ready. And since they're hybrids, it stretches out over a few weeks. So it's usually there's a 2-week period, roughly, where you're just putting the bags on. And then sometimes there's a little bit of a lull, and then the flowers start becoming receptive over another 2-week period or so. And you're monitoring all that time. You're keeping track of when they're ready, because you want to apply the pollen during that receptive period. So the total time is probably 5 or 6, about 5 weeks. But it's a lot of intense work in that 5-week period because we want to do as many crosses as we can. We got 4,000 nuts last year, and it averages a little over, usually get 1 or 2 nuts per burr. So it's probably about 3,000, like 3,000 flowers. I did have a chestnut moment, and it was kind of like we used to, eat chestnuts. My grandparents' house, they had chestnut trees in their yard. At that time, I didn't know there were Chinese chestnuts, American chestnuts. I didn't know the difference. So, I never thought about it. But later on, I started hunting. And I'd go with my dad and hunt. And, it was something I could do with my dad. He didn't have a lot of hobbies. Hunting was one of them. So I could go with my dad, and one time we were hunting, and he said, "Hey, come over here." And he's not like an excitable guy. He's like one of these guys that, manly guy, you don't really show excitement if you can help it, even if you are really excited. But he was really excited because he'd found an American chestnut tree that had some burs on it. And he wanted to show it to me. And then I understood at that moment that this is not the same as just a Chinese chestnut tree you have in your yard or whatever. This is something interesting. And he was telling me about it. And I asked my grandfather about it, who was still alive at the time, and he could remember when there were big chestnut trees. But my dad was so fascinated by these burs he'd found that he hadn't seen in a long time, maybe since he was a kid, that he still has the nuts that were in those burs still to this day. So that's like 20-some years ago. Well, 30 years ago, really. I mean, I was only like 10 or 11. So he just saved them because it was so interesting to him. And, it's still very exciting. It's very exciting for me if, I find one in the woods that's maybe got some flowers on it, because there aren't that many. He's come up here and helped us some. Even he's a little frail now, but he's helped me do some stuff up here, just volunteer. Of course, he's very excited about it because it's obviously something that he cares about. He tells me, the first house he lived in, because when they moved, they had to live in this old house that was made out of chestnut until they built their new house. So when he was like 2 years old, they lived in this basically really old shack made out of chestnut until they could construct their new house. So he knew about it, and he always asked me. I see him a lot, almost every week. And he asked me, "What'd you do this week? How things are going?" I bring him the magazine, the journal, and especially if my picture's in it or I have an article in it. I'm like, "Hey, Dad, look at this." So yeah, it's pretty cool. Mm-hmm. It's pretty cool when your family is interested in what you're doing.